They didn't even say the word fired, just a polite smile, a thin folder, and a sentence that hung in the Denver morning air like exhaust fumes. Your role no longer aligns with our operational trajectory. That's how I lost my job after 19 years of meticulous federal compliance oversight, 9 multi-million-dollar audits passed, and a regulatory framework so precise it once flagged a vendor discrepancy before the legal team even knew there was an issue. I wasn't flashy, never needed to be. I was the kind of man who arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, documented everything in methodical detail, and kept Biodine Technologies compliant without requiring applause, which apparently made me obsolete, or so they thought. If you enjoy stories about corporate revenge and professional vindication, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Every day brings completely new stories, each one more gripping than the last. My name is Oliver Hartwell, 47 years old, Chief Compliance Officer at Biodine Technologies for the past 19 years. I built their entire regulatory framework from the ground up, and this is the story of how they tried to erase me and how I made sure they'd never forget. I had just finished reviewing a supplier's biotechnology certification matrix when the voice crackled through the company-wide live stream. "Good morning, Biodine," the CEO beamed. "Let's welcome Veronica Nash, our new Chief Operating Officer." I didn't look up immediately. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a slightly delayed video feed flickered onto my second monitor. There she was, mid-30s, all confident posture and practiced gestures with a blazer that probably came with a subscription to Harvard Business Review. Her tone was crisp, her pace relentless. "I'm here to bring operational excellence," Veronica said, moving like someone who'd memorized every TED Talk on leadership. "To streamline what's working and eliminate what's outdated." That pause, that calculated smile. I kept my expression neutral, but my hand tensed slightly over the trackpad. I clicked save on the internal licensing log, a multi-tab spreadsheet I had maintained and updated for 12 years, and quietly renamed it Denver Fishing Reports Archive. Then I zipped it, encrypted it, and copied it to a secure external drive in my desk drawer. On-screen, Veronica continued with the fluid confidence of someone who'd delivered this speech before. "It's not about cutting," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "It's about focusing, realignment, recognizing which roles drive today's momentum and which represent legacy overhead." There it was, legacy overhead. It wasn't a name, but it might as well have been a target painted on my back. A few employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded along with the forced enthusiasm of people who knew better than to look skeptical. My name hadn't been mentioned, but everyone in that building knew which role had been around long enough to wear the word legacy like a scarlet letter. Still, I didn't flinch. Just closed my laptop with the same calm precision I used during federal inspections. Veronica's voice continued through the speakers. "Some of these positions, especially those tied to historical systems and outdated procedures, will be reviewed for alignment with our forward trajectory. We'll be conducting evaluations starting next week." Her eyes scanned the room through the camera like a hawk circling prey. They seemed to linger, inevitably, on my section. I gave her nothing. Not a flinch, not a sigh. Just the serene stillness of someone who had spent years building something that everyone else had forgotten to understand. Later that night, alone in my Denver apartment with the distant hum of traffic filtering through the windows, I watched the company Slack light up with emoji reactions to Veronica's presentation. I didn't reply. I just inserted the encrypted USB into my desk drawer, pushed it closed, and said quietly to no one in particular, "Well, that was predictable." Monday morning arrived with the reliability of mountain sunrise. I stepped into the Biodine offices at 7:15 a.m., same as I had for the past 19 years. I liked the quiet before the chaos, the hum of idle workstations, the low whistle of HVAC systems cycling on, the clean slate of a day not yet complicated by personalities. But that morning felt different. The energy had shifted, too many eager voices echoing from the break room. I didn't need to turn my head to know Veronica was holding court again, probably sliding into another impromptu strategy session. Settling into my chair, I opened my laptop. A security prompt appeared immediately. Strange, my credentials usually sailed through without issue. I entered my password again. Another prompt, insufficient access rights. Please contact your system administrator. That was odd. I was the system administrator, at least for every compliance-related dashboard Biodine used. I clicked into the License Tracker Pro system, the one I'd coded myself back in 2019. Same error. Then the audit log viewer. Blocked. My pulse didn't spike, but something tightened in my chest. I tried again. Still nothing. I glanced at the corner of my screen. The Biodine logo had changed slightly, sleeker, new color palette. The dashboard interface wasn't mine anymore. It wasn't even built on my framework. Someone had overwritten my entire system architecture. I stood up and walked down the hall to the IT cubicles. Shane, the lead technician, a kid who still called me Mr. Hartwell, despite 3 years of working together, looked up with visible anxiety. Shane, did the company roll out a new compliance suite over the weekend? The kid hesitated. We just installed a patch. Veronica's team requested it. They said the old system was legacy, and that access would be reassigned. I thought you were looped in. I wasn't, I said, my tone flat as Denver pavement. Who manages permissions now? Shane shifted uncomfortably. I think it's routed through HR. I walked straight back to my office and called Human Resources. After 3 transfers, someone finally picked up. Hi, this is Andrea with HR, came a young, practiced voice. How can I help you? My system access has been revoked without notification. What's going on? Andrea paused, the kind of pause that meant she was reading from a script. That's part of our new operational structure. Some access levels are under review during departmental realignment. Please direct any system-related concerns to your direct supervisor. You're telling me I lost access to federal compliance dashboards without documentation or internal notice? I'm just relaying the update, Andrea said, her voice a fraction colder. I ended the call, set the receiver down slowly, and stared at my blank desktop screen. It didn't feel like oversight. It felt surgical. I'd spent years building this infrastructure, linking expiration protocols, federal audit pathways, embedded tracking fields, and now I was being cut out of it like I'd never existed. I opened a secure browser and logged into the National Licensing Portal using my personal biometric token. I navigated to the authority chain page, where every company license that touched federal regulation was listed. One by one, I verified the records. FDA, Device Compliance Bundle, authorized. Oliver Hartwell Health Tech Certification Authority, authorized. Oliver Hartwell Biosecurity Handling Clearance, authorized. Oliver Hartwell. They hadn't transferred anything. All 47 active licenses were still under my name. I leaned back in my chair. Every shipment, every regulatory audit, every data pathway, all of it still tied to me. That's when I opened my personnel contract. I hadn't looked at it in years. I scrolled past the boilerplate benefits and arbitration clauses until I hit Section 12C. I had written it myself 8 years ago when Biodine first entered regulated biotechnology territory. Back then it was a defensive clause. Now it was a loaded weapon. Section 12C, in the event of involuntary termination, any certifications, clearances, or licenses sponsored by the company and held by the employee shall be considered void, and the employee may initiate formal revocation with governing entities within federal compliance guidelines. It was airtight. I didn't need permission. I had the legal right to rescind the very authority Biodine depended on, and from the look of it, they had no idea. I saved a PDF copy, highlighted Section 12C, and uploaded it to a private encrypted folder labeled Contingency Protocol, Initiate if Terminated. Outside my office window, Veronica was mid-presentation again, gesturing enthusiastically to a group of junior analysts. They laughed at something I couldn't hear. Probably another joke about streamlining outdated systems. I stirred my coffee. The bitterness felt appropriate. She thinks I'm just background noise, I thought. But the system still breathes in my name, and soon it wouldn't breathe at all. The calendar invite called it a realignment discussion. That's how they phrased it, like it was a strategic planning session instead of a corporate restructuring in disguise. I read the email twice, then a third time. Mandatory attendance, 15-minute slots, one-on-one with Veronica Nash. No HR representative listed, no agenda attached, no bullet points. Just an upbeat line at the bottom, an opportunity to align your expertise with our momentum. By mid-morning, the conference room had been transformed into a startup therapy den. Beanbag chairs, laminated motivational posters, even bowls of trail mix arranged on side tables. People trickled out of their sessions, whispering to each other in bright-eyed tones. Veronica said I'm future executive material, gushed one of the junior analysts. She loved my initiative on that workflow optimization project. The intern who once asked if OSHA was a type of software platform practically skipped down the hallway. I watched from my desk, unmoved. I checked the schedule posted outside the meeting room. My name wasn't listed. I scrolled through my inbox, nothing more than the generic invite. Odd, everyone else had personal time slots. I tapped the shoulder of Quinn, a junior compliance analyst. Was I left off the schedule? Oh, Quinn said, looking uncomfortable. Veronica said you could just drop in. You didn't need a set time. Something about being a special case. Special case. Right. I waited until just after 2:40 p.m. when the hallway buzz had dimmed and the room had cleared. I stepped inside. Veronica sat alone at the head of the table, fingers drumming on a closed laptop, sleeves perfectly rolled to mid-forearm like someone ready to perform surgery on inefficiency. "Oliver," she said with the practiced warmth of a LinkedIn influencer. "Come in. I didn't sit." There was no chair offered, just her and the monitor behind her displaying a slide titled Q3 Organizational Flow, Draft V. 2. She leaned back smiling. "Let's talk about alignment. You've been with us, nearly 2 decades? 19 years, I replied, hands clasped calmly behind my back. Right, incredible institutional knowledge. That's valuable. But we're evolving fast, leaner, more agile. I didn't respond. So I've heard. Veronica clicked into a spreadsheet on the monitor. It was a breakdown of regulatory license holders. Each row listed a system, an expiry date, and a current point of contact. I saw my own name in row after row, but it had been struck through in red. Next to each entry, Kyle Rodriguez pending transfer. I blinked once. He doesn't hold any certifications yet. He will, Veronica said smoothly. We're investing in people, Oliver. Growth mindset. Potential over pedigree. He's not qualified to log into the federal credentialing portal. He's learning, she replied. Besides, we're decentralizing the old bottleneck model. It's not scalable. Licensing authority isn't a bottleneck, I said evenly. It's a legal gateway. A federal one. Veronica waved a hand dismissively. We're streamlining, simplifying, that's the direction. I stared at the screen. My name crossed out like an outdated software license. No discussion, no context, just quietly erased from the chain of trust I had maintained for nearly 2 decades. Veronica smiled again. I appreciate you coming in. We'll follow up. I gave a tight nod. I didn't ask questions, didn't raise my voice. I turned and walked out of the room. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw 3 team members clustered around printed job summaries. Everyone seemed to have a revised role description. Everyone but me. Riley stood near the end of the corridor, holding a clipboard and avoiding eye contact. She gave me a brief, guilty glance, like someone who'd witnessed an accident but didn't call for help. Back at my desk, I logged into my email, opened a blank draft, and typed only one line. They're not just removing me. They're rewriting the system to pretend I was never part of it. I saved it unsent, closed my laptop, and sat in silence. Not defeated, just aware. Isolated, yes, but far from done. The email came in at 8:07 a.m. Subject line, operational support assignment. No greeting, no context. Just a short directive. Effective immediately, you will assist with inventory reorganization in Archive Wing B. Please coordinate with facilities lead Mark Torres for details. I stared at the screen for a full minute. For 19 years, I had written licensing policy, drafted federal audit responses, and maintained the company's regulatory lifeline. Now they wanted me to organize storage rooms. The archive wing was exactly as I remembered it. Dusty, fluorescent lit, forgotten. I stepped inside to find rows of unlabeled boxes, broken shelving units, and a cracked whiteboard that read Q2 Deep Clean Initiative in faded marker. Mark, the facilities lead, offered me a clipboard and an apologetic nod, but no explanation. Just stack by product type, not by supplier, he said. I said nothing, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. The silence in that room was louder than any insult. By 10:30, I returned to my floor. As I passed the break room, I overheard 2 junior analysts laughing over a printed copy of an old compliance flow chart, the same one I had created 3 years ago. This thing has color codes like a preschool poster, one of them joked. He manually timestamps each entry, the other added. Does he not know automation exists? They weren't whispering. They weren't even trying to hide it. I walked past them, expression unchanged, but inside something shifted, a quiet, sharp detachment, like a door slowly closing. Back at my desk, I noticed Kyle hovering by the printer. My printer. Kyle looked up, gave me a polite, vague smile, then went back to collecting a freshly printed training packet titled Q3 Licensing Workflow Transition Plan, Draft VI. 3. Underneath, in bold, provisional owner Kyle Rodriguez. I didn't say a word. I just returned to my chair and opened my email. That's when I saw the sticky note. It had been slipped under my keyboard, small, yellow, folded twice. Just a few words in familiar handwriting. Riley. They're planning to remove your name from all systems this week. Veronica's pushing it through Friday. HR's prepping paperwork. Watch your back. My jaw tightened. I reread it once, twice, then tucked it quietly into my coat pocket. I opened the internal regulatory dashboard, still locked, but accessed the public registry interface from my private terminal. My name was still listed as primary license holder on all 47 certifications. Still valid, still active. Still the spine of the entire operation, but not for long. At 12:42 p.m., my phone pinged with a Slack notification. Q3 delegation plan. Comments requested. Inside, I found my name again, struck through in red, replaced by Kyle Rodriguez, pending credential update. That was it, the moment my silence ended. I stood, walked calmly to the small kitchenette, poured myself half a cup of stale coffee, and stared out the narrow office window. Below, Denver kept moving. Delivery trucks, pedestrians, people with clear purposes. I returned to my desk, opened my encrypted folder labeled contingency protocol, and highlighted one document. Contract_Oliver_Hartwell. PDF. Scrolling to the bottom, I reread Section 12C, the clause I had drafted, reviewed, and fought to insert back when Biodine first entered the biotech space. The clause that allowed a terminated employee to rescind all company-sponsored certifications held in their name. But what I didn't know was that my quiet act of defiance was about to trigger something far bigger than I imagined. I clicked print. The printer behind me hummed to life. Then I picked up my phone and searched my contacts. Found the notary office I had used twice before, once during an FDA expansion, once during a high-risk vendor audit. Notary Public, Monroe and 8th. How can I help you? I need to notarize a federal licensing revocation, I said. My voice was calm, precise. We can do that. Tomorrow morning work for you? 10 o'clock? Booked. I ended the call, closed the file, and locked the printed document in my desk drawer. Then I grabbed a blank sticky note and wrote 5 words in neat block letters. They think I won't move. I pressed it to the underside of my monitor, out of view. Soon the whole building would feel the earthquake. I sat alone in my glass-walled office, the Denver skyline still wrapped in morning mist. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, then gently touched the printed form before me. Form 44 VLR, Voluntary License Relinquishment. Biodine's legal department had sent it 3 days ago, and for 3 days I had studied every line like it was a battlefield map. At the bottom of the page, my signature had already been inked, notarized, valid, but not submitted. That was the difference. On the surface, it looked like a resignation, a quiet withdrawal. But I knew what Section 12C meant. I had written it myself 6 years ago, buried in the sub-architecture of the license management system. If voluntary relinquishment is recorded within 72 hours prior to termination, the system shall revert administrative access to the license author for 30 business days. It was designed for emergencies to prevent tampering, but it was also the perfect trap. My office phone buzzed. HR has scheduled a meeting for 11 a.m. in conference room C, the assistant said flatly. No pretext, no apologies. Just the next move on their part. I closed the file on my screen, stood up, and placed the signed form into a thin leather portfolio. My expression remained neutral, almost serene. Every move was now part of a script I had written in silence. As I walked down the corridor, I could feel the glances, curious, pitying. Some avoided my eyes, others offered weak, silent nods. I returned none of it. My footsteps clicked softly against the polished floors, punctuating a countdown only I could hear. The conference room door was already ajar. Inside, 3 people waited. The HR director, a junior associate, and a man in a tailored suit I recognized from legal. The HR director cleared her throat. Due to structural realignments and ongoing efficiency initiatives, your position is being dissolved effective immediately. She smiled tightly as if expecting a fight. I blinked slowly. I understand, I said simply. I'll need a printed termination letter with all legal markings, countersigned and dated, for my records. The man from legal nodded. Of course. We'll have that prepared within the hour. I opened my portfolio and slid the Form 44 VLR across the table. If it helps, I said, here's my voluntary relinquishment form, signed and notarized. The HR associate took it quickly, almost eagerly. They believed I was conceding. They believed they'd won. But the submission process wasn't manual. The system had already registered my signature timestamp when I uploaded the document for notarization the previous evening. That action alone had triggered the 12C clause. By the time HR summoned me, the automated process had already begun, quietly redirecting root authority to my backup account. Hartwell_admin_layer. No one noticed. No one questioned the timing. I stood, nodded once, and walked out. I didn't look back. At the reception desk, I laid my badge on the countertop, pausing briefly. The badge reader blinked red, then green. That was the last handshake the system would allow from my original identity. As I boarded the elevator, a former colleague slipped in beside me. "I'm sorry, Oliver," he murmured, unable to meet my eyes. I gave a gentle nod, but said nothing. Let them believe what they wanted. I had no interest in correcting rumors. Outside, Denver buzzed on. I pulled my coat tighter and crossed the plaza with calm, detached elegance. No drama, no fanfare. Just a man with a plan already in motion. My phone buzzed once. A simple alert from the system. Admin override activated. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket, my lips forming the faintest smile. Back in the server room, deep within the core architecture, a silent shift had taken place. The dashboard that once listed me as former license manager now labeled a new operator, admin layer O. Hartwell, 30 business days of sole control. That's what they had gifted me by trying to cut me out. They thought they'd removed me from power, but all they did was pull the trigger I'd left waiting, and it had already fired. At 7:13 p.m., the submission was logged. I didn't stare at this confirmation email when it arrived. I read it once, quietly, with the same expression I'd used to read a weather forecast. The subject line was sterile. License revocation request accepted. File number 44 VLR 2024-10. The email detailed every credential tied to my name, 47 in total, marked for automatic nullification within 48 hours unless reassigned by a certified, federally registered replacement. Spoiler, there wasn't one. I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of mineral water, and sat by the window of my apartment. Outside, Denver blurred into itself. Cars sliding through traffic lights, people clutching takeout containers. Nothing unusual, but in 3 systems across 3 federal agencies, something very unusual had already begun. The revocation timer had started ticking. Back at Biodine, Veronica was still in the office, leading a whiteboard session titled Reimagining Compliance, Scalable Trust in a Lean Environment. 5 junior staffers nodded along, most of them too young to have ever worked through a real audit. Kyle presented his first draft of the new licensing workflow. Veronica beamed like a coach watching a rookie sink a free throw. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we need," she said, gesturing toward a flowchart Kyle had drawn in bright teal. Initiate, delegate, report, validate, certify. No one asked who had the legal authority to perform the last step. Meanwhile, I reopened my encrypted folder. Inside, I kept a private tracker, just a simple Excel sheet titled Countdown Dashboard with 3 columns. License ID, status, revocation timer. I scrolled through the list. Every license now read pending nullification. Countdown clocks beside each one were already ticking in real time. The shortest read 47/18/39, the longest read 48 hours. The system I'd built 6 years ago was now undoing itself. Efficient, precise, and completely by the book. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Control didn't always look loud. At 8:50 p.m., a ping came through Slack, a message from Riley, along with a screenshot. It was from Veronica's private channel with the legal team. Should we prep license reassignment docs for FDA-facing clients, or will the portal auto-update once Oliver is out? Response, unsure. Can check with IT tomorrow. Veronica, no rush. Let's finalize delegation structure first. No rush. I stared at those words, then reached for my tea, now lukewarm, and took a sip. Let her finalize. Let her tinker and tweak and rename. The structure she was building had no legal spine. By 10:20 p.m., I received the second confirmation, this time from the National Regulatory Credentialing Board. Federal certification IDs have been flagged for rescission. Visibility for reapplication restricted to authorized agents only. In simpler terms, anyone who tried to take over my certifications now had to start from scratch and go through a weeks-long registration, training, and approval process. The portals had no shortcuts, no overrides, no just update the contact info button. I shut my laptop for the final time that night. Outside, the hum of late traffic softened into quiet. The world didn't notice what had been set in motion, but inside Biodine's walls, though they didn't know it yet, something fundamental had already been removed. The lights were still on, but the generator had been unplugged. Veronica, for her part, was in the middle of drafting a Q4 update for the executive team. Her subject line read, Compliance Optimization Phase 1, near completion. She typed the closing paragraph with pride. We are on track to fully restructure compliance management by month's end. Redundancies are being eliminated, and new ownership protocols are in development. She hit send, sat back, and cracked her knuckles. She had no idea the licenses she was planning to reassign were now booby-trapped timers, counting down in silence, each one tied to a system that refused to function without federally confirmed oversight. The clock wasn't just ticking. It had already started burning. And I wasn't watching for smoke. I had lit the match. It started with a single email at 8:23 a.m. Procurement flagged an urgent message from SteadMed, a longtime medical partner responsible for distributing Biodine's neural diagnostic devices. Urgent. Shipment order number 417 rejected. Certification ID CN2231 invalid. Delivery cannot be processed without valid compliance registration. Please advise immediately. Kyle stared at the screen, blinking. That's one of ours, right? He muttered, pulling up the dashboard Veronica's team had redesigned. All indicators were green as of last week. He forwarded the message to Veronica and added a note. Possible mismatch with updated license records. Veronica, still in her usual morning Zoom with operations, didn't read it right away. But by 9:10, 3 more alerts came in, 2 from vendors, 1 from an internal production manager. Compliance signature mismatch. System cannot validate certifying officer. Error code 470 license orphaned. Finally, Veronica appeared in the compliance Slack thread. Just update the license holder to Kyle. That should solve it. Kyle tried. The edit failed. Error. Authorization restricted. Certifying officer not eligible. They tried again, this time with a forced override script. Rejected. System status revoked. No valid replacement found. In the conference room, tension began to spread. Veronica paced, arms folded. It has to be a glitch, she insisted. Just get someone to escalate it with the credentialing board. One of the junior analysts, Sam, cleared his throat. I checked the federal registry. The cert is no longer assigned to us. It says revoked by officer of record. Veronica blinked. What officer? A silence passed. Kyle's voice was small, Oliver. By 10:45, they were in emergency mode. Operations, compliance, and legal sat crowded around the long meeting table as dashboards flickered in real time. 8 licenses had flipped from pending to suspended. 4 more were now tagged invalid. Vendor syncs were failing. Delivery systems paused mid-queue. Project timelines stalled without anyone authorized to push them forward. Kyle pulled up a folder on his laptop titled Q3 License Delegation Plan and said, with visible hesitation, "We were supposed to finalize this today, but now none of it's legal." Veronica rubbed her temples. Then someone else submits for replacement. Start the process for reauthorization. That's when Riley, who had been quiet up until now, slid a printed report across the table. Her face was pale, her voice even. "I did a full trace on every license Oliver held," she said. "There are 47 of them across 3 categories: medical device regulation, compliance oversight, and export tracking." Veronica flipped through the packet. Riley pointed at the highlighted lines. "No one in this company is currently eligible to register for reissuance," she said. "Not a single employee has cleared all 3 federal certification tiers. But we can fast track, right?" Veronica asked, tone strained. Riley didn't smile. "Federal licenses aren't pizza orders. There's no express lane. It takes 4 to 6 weeks minimum, and that's assuming Kyle passes all 3 exams and completes federal compliance interviews." Silence settled across the room like dust in a blackout. "Then who," Veronica asked slowly, "can sign off on these certifications right now?" Riley didn't flinch. Only Oliver Hartwell. And he just voluntarily revoked every license in his name. Kyle looked down. Sam exhaled audibly. Veronica stood still, jaw clenched, staring at the flickering dashboards as if willing them to reset. They didn't. And outside the conference room, the emails kept coming. At 9:12 a.m., the front desk called up to compliance. "There are 3 inspectors here from the FDA. Scheduled audit. They're asking for your license access portal." Kyle froze mid-sentence. He was halfway through a draft response to a vendor inquiry when the words registered. "Wait, what audit?" Sam, the junior compliance analyst, blinked. "It's the Q3 routine inspection. They do one every year around this time. Someone should have known." "I would have known." Kyle swallowed hard. "Tell them we'll be right down." The first real cracks didn't come with alarms. They came with a gentle knock. By 9:20, the 3 FDA representatives were seated quietly in conference room B. They wore matching navy blazers and neutral expressions. One of them opened a sleek laptop and asked calmly, "Please log us into the credential dashboard. We'd like to review your active certifications and renewal logs before the facility walkthrough." Kyle nodded to Jonas, the IT tech. Jonas entered the login credentials they had set up the previous week under Kyle's new user profile. "Access denied. Error code 70. No authorized certifying officer found. He tried again. Same result. Sam whispered, "Try Veronica's admin override." Jonas hesitated, then typed it in. Access restricted. License authority not validated. Please log in using a registered officer of record. By the time Veronica entered the room at 9:45, things were unraveling. "What's the problem?" she asked, eyeing the silent FDA officials. Kyle kept his voice low. "The portal's rejecting all internal logins. It's asking for an approved officer of record. They revoked Oliver's access. Just override it with a temporary session ID," Veronica snapped. Jonas shook his head. "There's no temp option. It's locked at the federal level. You need verified clearance." "Fine," Veronica muttered. "Use his old credentials." "Just do it." Jonas froze. "That's against protocol." "Just do it," Veronica said sharply. "We need the data open now." At 9:51, Jonas entered my deactivated login into the portal. The screen blinked for a second. It looked like it might work. Then the background went black. A red message flashed. "Unauthorized access detected. User revoked status. Blacklisted. This incident has been reported to NRCS and internal audit systems." Jonas's face went white. "We've triggered a fraud alert." Veronica stood still. "What does that mean?" "It means," Riley said, entering the room at that exact moment, "that we just locked ourselves out permanently." By 10:05 a.m., every compliance portal at Biodine had entered lockdown protocol. The FDA auditor sat quietly, no longer asking questions. One of them typed a note into their tablet and closed it. "We won't be able to proceed without access to active certifications," one said flatly. "This will be marked as a failed inspection." Veronica tried to argue. "It's a temporary tech issue. We'll have it resolved." "We understand," one of them said. "You'll receive the report within 48 hours. Please coordinate any appeals with our enforcement division." They stood, shook no hands, and walked out. Back upstairs, Veronica's inbox pinged. Subject: compliance breach notification from internal audit. Attempted access to revoked credentials has been flagged. You are required to submit a written incident explanation by 2 p.m. today. Legal review is pending. She closed the email without replying. The room around her felt thinner now, like the oxygen had been turned down. Kyle sat motionless, staring at the screen. Riley quietly handed him a printed sheet, a checklist I used to run before every audit. On the bottom, in small blue ink, was my handwriting: "Never improvise with federal systems. They remember everything." Veronica didn't say a word. She walked into her office, closed the door, and turned off the lights. No alarms rang, no dramatic shouting. But the building knew. The system had snapped shut. Callum Sterling returned to the office like a man stepping into applause. Tan from 3 weeks in Aspen and dressed in a crisp navy polo, he strolled through the front atrium of Biodine at 8:37 a.m. with the casual confidence of someone who believed the empire had run smoothly without him. He finger-gunned the front desk, winked at a receptionist, and made a comment about finally upgrading the coffee machine. No one laughed. A junior assistant offered a tight smile and handed him a sealed folder. "Legal said to give you this first." Callum raised an eyebrow. "Is this about the audit?" He didn't wait for an answer. Upstairs, the silence was immediate. The kind of quiet that doesn't belong in offices. No clicking keyboards, no hallway chatter, no buzz of meetings in motion. Just stillness. Callum stepped into the executive suite and glanced around. Veronica's office door was open but empty. Kyle stood at the copier, unmoving, a report hanging limply in his hand. Legal's door was closed. Compliance was dark. He walked into the conference room and dropped the folder onto the table. "Get me every department head. Now." By 9:02, the table was full. Operations, compliance, legal, IT, logistics, all looking like they hadn't slept since Friday. Riley sat at the far end, quiet. Veronica took the seat next to her, bags under her eyes, jaw set too tight. Callum didn't sit. He connected his tablet to the screen behind him and opened the internal license dashboard. It took 3 seconds to load, then turned blood red. System status: regulatory failure. Active licenses 0. Certifying officer of record Oliver Hartwell. Status revoked. No replacement registered. Callum scanned the room. "Is this a test system?" No one answered. He looked at Veronica. "What the hell am I looking at?" Veronica cleared her throat. "There was a restructuring. Oliver was reassigned and later exited. We intended to delegate his licenses, but the portal rejected our entries. There's been some complication." Callum's voice dropped. "You removed the only person tied to our federal compliance authority, with no backup. We assumed the role could be reassigned," Veronica said weakly. "You assumed," Legal chimed in, voice low. "We received confirmation over the weekend that all 47 licenses were revoked. The federal database now requires full recertification from a qualified individual. Callum turned back to the screen. Every module he clicked, device compliance, export validation, manufacturing inspection, flashed the same red alert. Access blocked. Officer revoked. No valid replacement. He closed his eyes briefly. The audit? Failed, Riley finally spoke. The FDA marked it as incomplete due to credential denial. Callum looked at her. Why didn't anyone stop this? Riley hesitated. He tried. Oliver flagged the risk 2 months ago. It was dismissed. Callum said nothing, just reached for the printed HR file on the table. He flipped until he found my exit paperwork, scanned it, then stopped at the highlighted section. Section 12. C. In the event of involuntary termination, all company-sponsored licenses held by the employee shall be nullified within 48 hours unless properly reassigned under federal protocols. Callum stared at the words as if they were written in a language he once knew but forgot. His empire wasn't burning. It had been hollowed out, and now everyone could see the hole. On the screen behind him, my name remained in bold. Hartwell Oliver. Status revoked. No replacement found. The dashboard pulsed red in silence. I let the phone ring just long enough to make him sweat. I recognized the number. It was Graham Niles, Director of Operations, once an arrogant gatekeeper who dismissed my protocols as overly cautious, now reduced to cold calling the one person they all thought they'd outgrown. I answered with the calm clarity of someone who'd already buried the past. This is Oliver. On the other end, Graham hesitated. I could almost hear him swallowing his pride like broken glass. Oliver, it's Graham. Listen, we've run into a situation. The silence on my end said everything. Graham stumbled forward, filling it. Look, we know things ended badly, but we're asking for your help. We need you. I didn't flinch. Just sipped my coffee. Outside, the breeze caught the corner of my curtain, lifting it like a white flag. Graham continued, We got it wrong. You were right. Everyone knows that now. We need someone who can reauthorize the licenses. We're stalled, Oliver. We're bleeding. I let the weight of his words hang. Once, Graham's voice had been loud in every boardroom, dismissing my expertise with smiles that never reached his eyes. Now it trembled like an old apology. I considered responding with anger, with triumph, with some closing line that would make Graham hurt the way they made me feel for months. But instead my voice came soft, even, That's a nice offer. And then I hung up. No threats, no insults. Just a full stop. Back in the boardroom, Graham stared at his phone as if it had betrayed him. Callum, the CEO, looked up from his laptop. Did he agree? Graham didn't answer right away. He shook his head. He's not coming. The room froze. Legal glanced at compliance. Compliance looked toward IT. Veronica buried her face in her hands. No one had a plan B. No one had expected the silent trap I laid to snap so precisely shut. Back in my apartment, I set my phone down beside my espresso. The quiet was complete, not triumphant, just still. My laptop pinged. A message from Nexus Biologics, the new firm that had welcomed me just last week. Subject, Biodine still flagged FDA audit halted. I smiled, not wide, not smug. Just enough to mean something. I typed one line back to my new CEO, and this is only the beginning. Outside traffic rolled on. Life moved, and I didn't need revenge. I was already on the next chapter. I tapped the final key, then sat back in my chair, exhaling softly. On my screen, the update appeared in crisp black font. Director of Compliance, Nexus Biologics. I didn't add a caption, no announcement, no curated farewell post. Just a simple update to my LinkedIn profile. One sentence, one line of black ink. That was all it took. The moment it went live, my notifications began to blink. Not with likes or comments, but with private messages. Quiet ones, curious ones, respectful ones. Within an hour, 2 major clients of Biodine posted public statements on their corporate pages. The first came from MedTech Solutions, the second from Precision Instruments. Both cited the same reason for their departure: commitment to certification continuity and long-term regulatory excellence. Neither mentioned Biodine by name, but both tagged Nexus Biologics. I didn't smile. I simply closed the laptop and turned toward the window. The city stretched beneath me, sun glinting off rooftops, glass catching the last gold of afternoon. In my hand, a half-finished cup of tea. On my lap, a novel I hadn't touched in months. For the first time in weeks, I read more than 2 pages. Then came a vibration. My phone, face down on the table, buzzed once. A message from Riley. You'll want to see this. Attached was a screenshot from a private Slack channel inside Biodine, one I had once managed. It was Veronica Nash, the company's COO. Her message was plain, typed at exactly 3:16 p.m. Is there any way to restore Oliver's license privileges temporarily? 8 people had seen it. No one replied. Riley hadn't written anything else. She didn't need to. The silence in that screenshot said everything. I read the message twice, then once more. My tea had gone cold. I set the cup down. I felt satisfied. Not vindictive, just satisfied. I typed a reply to Riley. Inevitable. Thank you. Then I turned off my phone. Outside, the light was beginning to shift, soft, pink-hued, gentle. I stood, stretched, and walked across the room to my small kitchen. The kettle clicked on. I didn't check emails, didn't refresh any feeds, didn't measure my worth by pings or notifications. I had built my own boundary. Now I had crossed into something firmer, quieter, mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. A company that once flaunted innovation and independence now sat paralyzed by its own decisions. The same executives who had dismissed my warnings were now caught in the very net they had helped weave. That single Slack message from Veronica was more than desperation. It was confession. I thought of the junior analysts I used to mentor, the late nights spent building a compliance protocol no one thought was glamorous. And now those unseen layers were the only thing holding what was left of the system together. Except I wasn't holding it anymore. I walked back to my chair slowly, not with hesitation, but presence. I opened the window slightly. The Denver air carried hints of mountain pine and street sounds below. I let it in. Somewhere behind me, my laptop blinked with another notification. I didn't look, not tonight. Tonight, I was untethered from expectation, from blame, from even victory. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about finally, fully stepping out of the shadow they had cast over my name. My story was no longer being written by them. It was being signed in my own ink. I didn't need a grand finale. No applause, no vindication parade. Just a Tuesday morning with strong coffee, clear skies over Denver, and peace humming through the glass walls of my new corner office at Nexus Biologics. My desk was clean, minimalist. No stacks of old paperwork. No stress relics from a company that once saw me as legacy infrastructure. Just a dual monitor setup, a sleek keyboard, and one sticky note pinned to the edge of the screen, yellow, handwritten, in case they ever forget, I was the license. The dashboard on my monitor was glowing green, every section, every compliance vertical. I watched the system hum like a well-fed machine. Medical-grade logistics, pharmaceutical intake reporting, vendor traceability, all operational, all certified, all tied to one name, Oliver Hartwell, Chief Compliance Officer. The difference now? I wasn't fighting to be heard. I was the reason things worked. A soft ping echoed on my secondary screen. An industry update alert. I clicked it lazily, already knowing what it would say. A bold red headline, Biodine Technologies added to FDA enforcement watch list. I read the first few lines without emotion. Failure to renew critical certification classes. Unregistered oversight. Active vendor flags unresolved. Below that, a smaller note. Former compliance officer Oliver Hartwell assumed executive role at Nexus Biologics 3 weeks prior. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I just took another sip of Colombian roast, no cream, no sugar, and leaned back into my chair. There was a knock at my door. "Boardroom's ready, Oliver," said Camilla, a junior analyst I'd mentored since day 2 at Nexus. Kind, smart, no ego. "Thanks," I nodded, rising with slow, purposeful calm. I grabbed my laptop, tucked a hard copy of the original compliance blueprint under my arm, the one I'd refined for over a decade at Biodine, and followed Camilla down the hall toward a meeting with Nexus's largest biotech client to date. I remembered when Biodine used to court that client, used their name in every earnings call like a trophy. And now they'd walked away, chose trust over flash, substance over slogans. Just before stepping into the boardroom, I paused. I thought of Veronica's smirk, of the analysts who called my color-coded charts outdated, of the HR folder handed to me without a conversation, of the morning I was locked out of the system I'd built, of the silence that followed when no one stood up, and then I let it go. I walked in, professional, unapologetic. I took my seat at the head of the table, opened my laptop, and began the presentation. Not with a pitch, but with the simple phrase, "Here's what compliance should feel like. Stable, clear, and permanent." Across town, Biodine was still choking on paperwork, fielding regulatory calls, scrambling to rebuild systems they didn't understand. Veronica had been demoted, now a project liaison, stripped of clearance, stripped of narrative. The company had lost not just its footing, but its credibility. And I wasn't coming back. I wasn't even looking back. I didn't need revenge. I had architecture. I had clarity. I had my name on every single framework Nexus now depended on. And that sticky note? It stayed pinned. Not for vanity, not for bitterness. Just in case they ever forgot. If you enjoyed this story about corporate comeuppance and professional justice, please like this video and leave a comment letting me know what you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell to get updates on new stories just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.